Well, President Xi Jinping says the China-Hungary relationship is now at its best in history. The leader is in Budapest for talks with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. High on the agenda, infrastructure projects and the war in Ukraine. President Xi says friendship between the two nations has yielded fruitful outcomes, adding he's ready to promote a high-level development of ties. President Xi attended a welcome ceremony with military honors held by Hungary's president and prime minister. The two nations are marking 75 years of diplomatic ties and are expected to sign more than a dozen new cooperation agreements. Hungary is the last leg of Mr. Xi's European tour, his first to the continent since 2019. Hungary was the first EU member to sign on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. A flagship project funded by Beijing is the railway linking Budapest to Serbia's capital, Belgrade. After several delays, it is expected to be completed next year. One section that is already up and running is in Serbia. And for more, Alex Cadier joins us live from Brussels. Alex, President Xi and Prime Minister Orban set to sign a string of deals on cooperation. In what areas are the two sides stepping up their relations?
Yeah, about 16 or 18 of these cooperation deals, we understand, will be signed between the two leaders. Not exactly clear what they will be, but we know they may include the large-scale infrastructure projects that you were just mentioning as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, that giant foreign investment and infrastructure building initiative by the Chinese government. That will be part of the discussion. So too will be business deals. In particular, China's Giant Wall Motors is considering opening a factory in the south of Hungary, in keeping with what we've seen over the last few months, over the last few years. BYD, the Chinese car maker, the giant Chinese car maker, has already established or is establishing its first European factory in Hungary as well. So these are the kind of deals you can expect. Something to look out for in the next few hours is whether or not a security deal of any description is being agreed, or at least being discussed between the two countries, between the two leaders. That is something that will be scrutinized very closely here in Brussels and in the rest of the European Union. Now, we know that Hungary has a warmer relationship with China than a lot of other EU countries. That has been a thorn in the side of the European Union. So certainly that's the kind of cooperation that'll be crucial to look out for. But also on geopolitics, on diplomacy, the big question will be the war in Ukraine. On that, China claims neutrality. Hungary, a bit more skeptical, certainly will be looked at very closely from Brussels.
Oh, Alex, as you mentioned, this scrutiny because Hungary is a bit of a standout within the European Union on Russia as well as China. Or with China and Hungary forging closer ties, could that impact anything within Europe? Has there been any reaction from the bloc so far?
Well, that's the big fear from the European Union, is that if Hungary decides that Chinese interests are more closely aligned with Hungarian interests, for example, they may become a continuing frustrating partner here in Brussels. We've seen Hungary in Brussels at the European Council holding up funding for Ukraine, holding up sanctions against Russia, holding up any number of measures that the rest of the European Union wanted to put through but had to be unanimous, and therefore Hungary has that veto power, which carries a lot of weight in this city. Now, we don't know at the moment that there is something lined up that could create that clash, but certainly a rapprochement, a closeness between Hungary and Chinese interests could be a problem for the European Union, particularly as we know the view from the EU is that there are really serious concerns about its relationship and the risks related to its relationship with China. That's why the EU Commission, that building behind me, wants to de-risk its relationship. A closer ties with Hungary and China could increase the risks.
Thanks to Alex Cadier reporting live from Brussels. And CNA's Olivia Siong joins us live now from Beijing. Olivia, this is President Xi's first trip to Europe in 5 years. Now, apart from Hungary, before this, he was in Serbia, and before that, he was in France. So 3 stopovers this time on this European trip. What is the significance of this trip for China?
Well, Wei Su, you know, the fact that this is, as you mentioned, President Xi's first trip to Europe in over trade practices and Russia's war in Ukraine. Hungary seemed to be an outlier among the EU. So on this leg of the trip, it's likely you won't be hearing talk about those allegations of overcapacity or those warnings for China not to back Russia's war in Ukraine. It's quite unlike what we have seen on Mr. Xi's first leg of this European tour in France, where those conversations were on the table and Mr. Xi strongly pushing back against those accusations. And, you know, in a written speech ahead of this last leg of his European trip, Mr. Xi said the two countries have set a fine example of building a new type of international relations. And don't forget as well, besides what's being done in these countries, Mr. Xi's trip being closely watched here in China, the kind of coverage that the trip is getting in Chinese state media, also trying to portray a diplomatic win for the country and for the Chinese leader. Wei Su.
All right, Olivia, closely watched in Beijing, closely watched, as we heard just before you came on, in Brussels as well. Now, if China wants to make this a diplomatic win, are there any other major outcomes for President Xi that he might expect coming out from this European trip?
I think economic development and getting those Chinese investments into Hungary will be top of mind for President Xi. As we heard, that over 16 agreements possibly going to be signed down the road. Hungary also known to be cooperative with China, being among the first to, being the first rather in the EU to sign onto the Belt and Road Initiative. Hungary, with its friendly ties with China, could prove to be an important gateway for Beijing into the European market, with Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD setting up its first factory in Europe in that country. Also, a Chinese battery plant is also being built at the same time, which could mean that these Chinese companies may be able to avoid those potential tariffs given the probe that is going on in these particular sectors. And so that could also be valuable for China and Chinese companies moving forward.
Thanks. Olivia Siong reporting live to us there from Beijing.